Milo Denison.
And I'm Kev Bamboo, and this is Rip It Up.
On each episode, we ask questions that are impacting creatives around the world today.
And today we've got with us Josh Leverton, and we're going to be talking about performing in a band and anxiety.
Yes, thanks for joining us, Josh.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
Just to start it off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So basically, I'm a musician in the local scene. I've basically been messing around with instruments since I was about sort of 15 or 16 or so. Never really sort of took much to it at an early age. It was just like a bit of a thing where I had a guitar that was just sat in the corner of the room, sort of gathering dust essentially. And just every now and then I'd get it and play a little bit, but I wasn't particularly fussed. But some point in time, I just sort of really took to it. I think I just got into music in general more, just like actually listening to what was out and about and some of the records and CDs and albums that have been out for a while that suddenly sort of seemed more appealing for some reason. And I don't know, I guess I just sort of started thinking about, I might as well, if I've been playing it, have a go at actually playing some of them songs. And as time went on, I don't know, it just became more and more of a kind of, what the word be? It was something that I just sort of had a real intent to try and sort of get better at. It wasn't any longer like a sort of just a thing to pass the time. It was something I'd sort of taken to as a full-on sort of hobby. And then as time goes on down the line, a few more years, got a bit of practice with singing and that sort of thing, took to open mic nights and various different things round and about. Before I knew it, started writing original material, got that out and about, got some gigs in. And I don't know, it just the ball just sort of got rolling, I guess. And I've just completely up for it now. as much in the sort of live music scene as I can get, I'm all up for it. Got quite a bit of a sort of connection to like the local scene with like the Derby and Notts scene, acoustically and bands and that kind of thing as well. So yeah, I don't know. I've just basically tried to introduce myself and become a part of as many different circles in the music family locally as I can.
That's great. So we've been open here in the UK for a few weeks now. Have you had an opportunity to play in public?
There's been a few.
Oh, great. Already. That's fantastic.
Only a couple of open mics, but they're some of the ones that I first started with as well. So it's been nice to have a bit of a return to a nostalgic scene that I've been missing for quite some time. Because I think it was literally yesterday I played and a couple of weeks ago. And before that, it was probably September, October, something like that. I can't even remember when it was now.
We're sat in the kind of the like limbo land of lockdowns where you kind of was allowed to kind of go and briefly have a bit of freedom, and then it was like, oh no, everyone back inside again.
That's it, yeah.
It's been a tough one for a lot of people across the whole kind of creative sectors, really. I mean, and yeah, I suppose we're going to kind of get on to our main kind of first topic, which is kind of all centered around our little public response survey that we do every time that we do this show. And we asked the public, have they ever had to give a presentation, do a live performance or a public speech or even similar? And, it's always usually a fairly, simple-ish kind of question. We break to them and it's simple, just yes or no. And literally everyone in there that's responded and said yes, that someone has at least had to give some form of public speech or whatever. So we had all that, and then we offered them up to just give a couple of comments and say what the kind of things that they had to give. So one person put, I often have to speak publicly pre-COVID in person to groups of 1,000, usually on the topic of culture and engagement in the workplace. Somebody else just put a best man speech at a wedding. So, there's probably tons of people that have had to give those kind of things. Somebody else put, as part of a training course, my final exam was to present my model of a training schedule. That sounds kind of interesting, but I don't think I could do that.
No, I couldn't either.
And then we also had, someone said to recite a poem as well. So lots of a varied bunch there. And, we've got the day-to-day, and then we've got people that have actually deliver stuff to quite large audiences. So pretty interesting. What about yourself, Milo? Have you, in terms of, public performing? I know that you do a fair bit of acting, so.
Yeah. So for me, certainly as plenty of theater and that kind of stuff and speaking, it's funny. It reminded me I was in college and I directed a play as my, directorial debut for a thing as a school production. And it was a dinner theater, and the closing night, I didn't really know I was supposed to say anything, but the instructor of the program calls me up in front of all the people at the dinner, and they're like, "Oh yeah, now I'm introduced to our student director. He'd come up here, say a few words about it." And it was funny because as an actor, I'm like, I'll get up and be a character and do my thing all night long. But then when it was actually me as myself standing in front of an audience, I was like, the play's funny. It was so funny.
I suppose being kind of caught on the spot there a little bit as well was
that too,
one of those.
But it's interesting how I would imagine, because you guys are performers, so if you go up on stage as yourself, in essence of just talking about some verses, you're up there doing a performance. Do you find that it's easier when you're up there doing your performance versus just being yourself talking?
I mean, for myself, I feel like it's pretty much hit the nail on the head with that. I think when you're performing as an artist or such as yourself in theatre, in the sense that it's sort of pre-scripted and sort of practiced, you've got a set sort of path that you're supposed to be taking with what you're actually doing on stage. And so in the moments where there might be nerves, I think you can at least sort of focus back to what it is that you've been practicing over all that time. Whereas if you're there speaking to so many people just as yourself, there's a lot more sort of improvisation, even just in just standard conversation. Those examples that were mentioned with other people that have had performance, I think like of some description, especially the best man speech, they're all things that I'd be terrified of, in all honesty. I think it is. It's just whether you're having to sort of think up what you're going to be saying on the spot. I mean, you can go so far with certain things like speeches as to how much is practiced and rehearsed, but it is definitely something that's daunting. And I think it's not surprising either that there's so many people that will have had that, because I think when you think about it, a lot of people will have had their first sort of presentation or sort of speech that they've had to give during sort of like school time. When you look at like school assemblies and that kind of thing, I mean, I'm only sort of speaking from my own experience at my school, but I imagine it's pretty much the norm for just about anywhere. You'll have classes that'll take it in turns to sort of give their speech or their presentation for whatever the school assembly is in that time. And I think that's the first place where a lot of people would sort of think, oh, wow, this is actually quite daunting.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the first places I think that you when you go to school, especially kind of obviously like senior school, or as it would be like for you guys, Milo, kind of like high school, is the one where you kind of have that first opportunity or that first revelation that you're going to have to like stand up in front of quite a few people and maybe, say something. So even at a young age, and as I say in America, Milo, usually, it'd be at high school, I imagine. Was it high school or senior high?
Well, that particular story that I just told was in college. But yeah, you might, yeah. I mean, in high school, or I think in any school, right, you have to do class presentations and that kind of stuff. And it's good. It teaches kids to actually get comfortable at speaking in front of, I mean, if you go out and you work most jobs, at some point, you might have to give a presentation or do some kind of like, even just a toast for people. Like, it's been great working with Bob in these past 20 years. Here, here's the prepared speech for his last day, kind of thing.
Yeah, here's the watch.
Mm-hmm.
See you later, Bob.
Yeah. Nice knowing you. Yeah. So, Josh, so you are a musician, and you've kind of started off doing solo stuff, doing band stuff. So tell us, since we're on the subject, like how has your performances and career kind of evolved from that, like first solo performance to kind of what you're doing now?
It's been a very strange journey, because I'd always liked sort of to an extent what I was doing as a solo artist, from the sake of like sort of seeing the progressions and that kind of thing. I think somewhere along the line, there was just something just a little bit missing in what I was actually producing in the actual music for for the originals, so to speak. So what I was doing solo was basically through a loop station. So same as the likes of like Ed Sheeran or some local artists within like sort of the Midlands use it as well. So such as Warren Island, Funky and the Two Tone Baby. There's quite a few people who've used it, and it's, for some people it's sort of something that captivates a lot of interest, because it's a very strange way of building up a live performance. But then there's other people who don't necessarily actually understand what's going on, and you can sort of try and explain it, but it's one of them where doing so is a little bit like having to explain a joke afterwards. It kind of like sort of like defeats the object of doing it, because you realize then that it's not actually been as impressive as it could have been during the actual performance itself. So, and then as well as that, it was one of them where it's, because of the way in which it works, there's no ability to change your tempo or change key very often or anything like that. So it was quite sort of limiting for songwriting. And I realized so far down the line that I was writing some very, what's the word I'd be looking for? So basically commercialized sort of sounding songs, in the sense of having a really, really basic structure. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just wanted to be doing something more with the sort of songs that I had in mind that I wanted to write. They just weren't feasibly applicable with the setup I had as a solo artist. And I've always loved that sort of full, thicker sound. So I thought, I think it's about time for me to start up a band. That was a bit of an awkward process, because it kind of formed during a song that I wrote, which I initially wrote on the looper for just myself, and then realized actually no, but maybe this should be the debut one for actually doing something with a band. So that was taken to the studio for the first time as well. So that's the first song I've actually had produced in like a proper studio as well, rather than recorded in my room. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, because that was done in February last year. And we had that recorded and mixed and mastered, and we thought that sounds fantastic. We need to get that out. Now, we'd got the band lineup sorted, and then COVID hit. So we were kind of in a position of, we've got the sort of plans for a band, and now no way to actually implement that. So, because obviously we couldn't meet up because of obviously the restrictions and isolation and that kind of thing. And there's so many other bands that are all sort of going around, and that, you know, they've been posting about stuff they've been doing over the years, and we couldn't do that. We'd only just started up, so we couldn't do any sort of throwback or nostalgia posts. So I'd set like the page up for us based on the existing solo artist page that I'd got, and sort of I just want
to drop it back a little bit, because you talk about, was it the loop station? Like, obviously when you went from your solo career, was it the loop station that you found that was limiting itself, or was it something else? Is it like how some people were towards you about using that loop station? Or
it was a little bit of both, I think. So I mean, there were a lot of times where I'd play a gig or an event or a festival or an open mic night or whatever it was while I was playing solo, and as I say, there were certain people that just sort of didn't get it, or they weren't all involved. I think for certain crowds and certain venues in particular, the crowd will just be looking for a very specific type of music that's just sort of gets going and people know what they're listening to, kind of thing. With a loop station, you're having to build up the track from start. And sometimes, because of the tracks I was writing, they'd got quite a lot of layers. It could be like sort of 2 minutes or so from the start of actually looping before the beginning of the song technically actually starts, like with lyrics, like for the first verse, so to speak. And some people weren't really all on board with that. They're kind of like sort of lost interest partway through just the looping stage, which is fair enough.
Did anyone ever think that you was kind of not like actually not playing?
Yeah, I did have that as well, actually. I think it was the King of Prussia. I was playing there, and
you were playing for the King of Prussia?
That'd be pretty awesome.
I suppose without context, that does sound like that, yeah.
I was just playing for the King of Prussia, you know.
Invited me over, kind of like the sound.
Yeah, so with the context, basically a venue in Hena, which is a local village to me. Basically, it's a
very small town in the Midlands, Milo.
Yeah.
So near Robin Hood again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of them where someone had basically started trying to talk to me whilst I was actually playing the song. accusing me of essentially just using backing tracks. So not sort of actually understanding that I was recording and sort of like, dubbing over and like looping new tracks over and over and actually live. Just basically thinking that I was pressing buttons on the floor and it was like a karaoke machine. It was just making the track start. That's what he thought was going on. And I did try to explain it, what was actually going on. Again, shouldn't sort of have to. I don't mind, but if I'm having to, it kind of defeats the object of doing it, because it kind of takes away from the sort of performance from actually having to explain what I'm doing. But even after that, it just wasn't having any of it. It just basically said, no, you're miming, mate. With the effort that you put into it, you don't want to have to deal with that.
No, and I can imagine that can be quite effective. I'm pretty importantly, to be honest, quite effective on your performances and like kind of your own confidence, especially when you're just a solo artist on your own. There's no one else in the band to kind of, turn around to, and they can't chip in and say, "What are you on about, mate?" It's you in a random venue with probably several people, and they probably got mates there with them.
Absolutely, yeah.
But what I was kind of thinking is that also the way that kind of can affect is that obviously it can kind of like bring on kind of like experiences of anxiety and things like that as well. And I know that you've spoken about that publicly yourself, but would you kind of like, and especially within performing, would you be able to tell us like some of that around your own experiences with, anxiety as well?
Yes. So it's not something I have to deal with quite as drastically as I did when I first started. And I think that'd be the case for certain amounts of people, but not everyone. Because obviously some people have it, quite a lot more severely than others. But it's for people that haven't ever experienced it, it is more physically debilitating than you'd expect it to be. So basically, the best way I could try and describe it is just an overwhelming flood of thoughts of basically every wrong scenario, every possible bad outcome that can come as the result of an event or a certain action or thing that you're doing. And basically, the more you keep thinking about those things, the more likely it ends up being to actually happen. So for myself in performance, it was one of those where when I first started, obviously, I'd not been playing for long enough to actually have practiced much. So going on stage, the first thing I'm thinking is, what if I forget these lyrics? What if I forget what the next chord is? What if I forget where the bridge is or what key I'm supposed to be playing? All these different things. And they're just constantly circling around your mind. And sometimes that sort of voice, so to speak, can be so loud it can actually put you off what you're doing. And it's a vicious cycle as well, because as soon as you've actually started making mistakes as a result of that, not being able to concentrate on what you're doing, you're then thinking about that mistake that you've made, which then puts you off what you're doing even further. And it just keeps going, basically. There's a lot of people, including myself, who, when we first sort of started, there'd been a few times where, as we've played, we've had to essentially stop because it's just complete sort of like brain melts. It's like it can get to a point where you can't actually sort of like function properly in that. And then there's all the repercussions afterwards as well. So after that performance, thinking, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe performing's not where I'm supposed to be. Other people are sort of playing sort of without much trouble, and I'm having so much energy drained from me by just trying to play this song. Maybe this isn't the right sort of thing for me to be involved in. That's the best sort of way I could sort of summarize it for myself within sort of music, at least. As time's gone on, I think one of the biggest things that can help with it is essentially sort of experience dealing with it. Like, the sort of measures that you can take to prevent that happening. Because I think it's easier if you do experience anxiety, basically just doing what you can to prevent yourself from being in a situation that actually enables it to be triggered in the first place, rather than trying to actively sort of remove it once it started happening, if that makes sense.
So you're going to have to be in situations that cause anxiety in regards to removing it or just dealing with it. Like, are there any kind of techniques? So let's say, for example, you're going up on a stage, you're feeling that anxiety kick in, and it's like, oh, fuck, we're going to suck tonight, kind of thing. Do you do anything, like breathing or tell yourself something, or like, how do you kind of in that moment deal with it?
In terms of sort of physically speaking, things that you can do in the moment that do help For me, a little bit, but I think that it might be, I think it's one of them variables where for some people it might help them more than others, in the same way as with a lot of different mental health things, people have got different sort of coping or sort of like dealing strategies. And so one thing to an extent would be a little bit of a kind of grounding thing. So I'm prone to panic attacks as well. And there's been more than a few times where I've actually had a panic attack during a song. And that's awful because like your mouth goes completely numb and you're there trying to sing and you can't even feel your tongue. But no, it's so anything like as simple as sort of like grounding can, for me, just sort of like before going on stage, just sort of help a little bit. Because I think one of the things they say a lot of the time for performers as well is put yourself in an environment where you are as sort of can feel as comfortable as possible. So it can even come down to like things like wear something, like they say it for the studio as well. They say wear something that's comfortable. And I see now why they say that, because if you're wearing something that's just like, I don't know, not what you'd normally wear, or something that you're aware of the fact that you are wearing, I'm not trying to say that too quickly, but it's one of them where it'll take a little bit of what's actually on your mind away from what you're actually trying to do. So basically, you want to be as in the zone and with your thoughts, sort of subconsciously speaking, as much as possible. So yeah, grounding, I'd say if you can, if that's something that you're capable of doing. So basically,
for anyone that doesn't know, that's listening, that doesn't, because someone might not know what grounding is.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, I mean, what is grounding?
It's basically sort of reconnecting with your senses. So it's the same technique that you'd say for essentially panic attacks. So basically go through the senses and basically pick what is the first most obvious thing that is sort of naturally occurring that you're aware of in that moment. So it just takes away from all of the thoughts and everything. So say you're about to go on stage with an acoustic guitar and you're feeling a little bit sort of fluttery, like your mind's taking over a little bit. First thing I'd say would be to take a deep breath, feel the fact that you're holding a guitar. So you want to be, able to sort of like feel, or whatever instrument it is that you've got.
So like touch something or...
Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a guitar, just to sort of reconnect with the fact that you're actually touching something, essentially. Because that's one of the first thing I've noticed, like panic attacks as well, is going numb in your fingertips. And I think that just sort of helps to stop that from happening. Have a look around at everything that's around you. It doesn't have to be sort of anything sort of over the top, but just to sort of take a step back and actually realize the room that you're in. Because sometimes even just, a really sort of standard room that's got like a sort of makeshift stage built into it, just standing on that stage can make it seem a lot more daunting than if you were to just be on that stage with like sort of, I don't know, cleaning it or just sort of no one else around or whatever. So I think if you can just sort of look around and just reassure yourself that you are just in that room and it's not like like an interrogation sort of scenario, or how would you put it? It's not quite what your mind's going to be trying to sort of make it out to be. It is just that room that you will have been in, sat down not that long ago. If there's
like
people
refamiliarizing yourself with something that you kind of, what it is, and it's like, but it's just like you sending a message to your brain again that's saying, this is a stage and this is where I am, kind of thing. Not kind of building it up to be something else.
That's it. Another thing I'd probably do as well, this is like a personal one of mine, is shutting my eyes just for a few seconds before going on and just sort of listening to what's going on, whether it's not, like proper conversations but just like sort of hearing people's voices and that kind of thing. And I just sort of, I don't know, I think like having eyes shut for a second just sort of helps to sort of clear my head. It's like starting like a blank new canvas just to rid all of the thoughts, I suppose. I think there's still going to be elements of anxiety that are sort of there, but it makes it more manageable. I mean, if there's a way to sort of negate it entirely, I'd love to know. But that's one thing personally that I've found has helped. But I mean, aside that, dealing with it over time in the sense of acknowledging and respecting the mistakes that you've made when you've spoken publicly or made a presentation or played a gig or performance or whatever it is that you've done in that sense. actually acknowledging and respecting the mistakes that you've made in the past, and the fact that you've chosen to continue and learn from them is one of the other biggest things that you could possibly do. Because at one point I'd be going home after making, even if it was just something like a really tiny mistake that people didn't even necessarily pick up on, I'd be sort of essentially beating myself up about it. And I'd tell sort of close friends, oh, I can't believe I did such and such. I should have known not to do that, and that kind of thing. But then they'd say to me, oh, we didn't even notice. So you kind of like, I don't know, you kind of like being quite sort of self-detrimental, and it's not really achieving anything to an extent. You do need to sort of have an element of constructive criticism that you can give yourself in order to actually improve at what you do. But there is a line that you can cross with that and become so detrimental that you're actually preventing yourself from wanting to improve, because you get to a point where you think, no, that's it. I'm no good at this. And you definitely don't want to cross that line. I have a few times, and I know a fair few of my friends have as well. And they've had like sort of breaks from the scene for basically just sort of try to clear the head and make sure that it is actually what they want to do or not.
Yeah, almost impacting your progress. But thanks for actually sharing your initial thoughts on anxiety and your own experiences as well. But also kind of I want to touch on, because obviously it's quite relevant in the media at the minute, someone that's quite a high profile as a sports star is Naomi Osaka, who decided to withdraw from the French Open due to I don't know, a lot of those pressures surrounding anxiety. And really, I personally, I would say, it's a massively courageous thing to do with that much kind of media attention that would be on that individual. I don't know, Milo, what do you think about that whole scenario?
I have no idea who that person is. I don't follow tennis at all.
Well, she's basically, she was number one, and she's currently number two female tennis star, but in the sense of just being, pretty big in whatever your profession is, and that pressure that comes with that.
Yeah, I'm certainly, it's interesting because when you're starting out, of course, you have that anxiety of like, I'm new, I suck, nobody's going to like me, any of that kind of stuff. And then you go out and you do a performance. And like Josh was saying, you make one mistake that you're the only one who notices, nobody else even notices. And then it's just like, see, I knew I sucked. I was totally right when I said I sucked. And it just kind of builds on itself. And then as your career goes up, you actually start to gain a certain level of skill and talent. So you're like, okay, I'm pretty good. But then you get a different kind of pressure of like, okay, now I need to maintain this level. Yeah. So like this tennis star, she's like, top of the top tier tennis star. And it's like, you've got all this pressure to continue being number one. And then you make that little mistake and it's like, oh shit, I'm clearly no longer number one anymore. So it's crazy how no matter what level you're at, you still have those nerves and anxiety. It's just for different reasons. But it's just our own insecurities in life, making their way out. Should we do a song?
Yeah,
since we're talking about performing, Josh, you want to grab a guitar?
So I'm going to play a cover. It's a song I've learned recently, and it's basically one of the songs where I've noticed through really wanting desperately to learn this song that my voice has actually improved a little bit to actually reach the notes for it. So it's one that I've been quite proud of being able to play recently. It's Royal Blood, Little Monster. Hey, little monster, I got my eye on you. Where are you going? Where you running to? Hey, little monster, you know it's all okay. I'm gonna love ya no matter what you say. I got love on my fingers, lost on my tongue. You say you got nothing, so come back and get some. Heartache to heartache, I'm your wolf, I'm your man. I say run little monster, before you learn who I am. Hey little creature, tell me what's on your mind. Where have you been hiding, and can I come this time? So please to please ya, remove that heart off your sleeve. Then we discover I got love on my fingers, lost on my tongue. You say you got nothing, so come back and get some. Heartache to heartache, I'm your wolf, I'm your man. I say run little monster, before you learn who I am. So come back and get some. Heartache to heartache, I'm your wolf, I'm your man. I say run little monster, before you learn who I am.
Nice one.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yes, thank you. There we go.
I think I've only actually heard that song played in acoustic style once before.
Yeah, I was going to say, because if it's the song, I think it's a pretty electric song, right? Like the guy, Royal Blood, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It was a bit of a weird one trying to translate that to chords, because obviously Royal Blood being based around essentially drum and bass. Yeah. Oh, it's a fantastic song. I love that.
Yeah, it's a good rendition of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, because Royal Blood basically, they are just two artists,
guys,
and like you say, it's just literally a drummer and a bassist. It's like the sound that they get is mad, but yeah, to hear it in an acoustic sense is cracking as well. So, but no, I've got to now try and link on from that, because obviously I really love that track, but to link on to the next segment, I don't know, because that tune absolutely rocks, and it was nothing but cheese at all. But there we have it, cheese. So our next little segment is on cheese, Josh, and it is my favourite part. And I'm going to ask you, what is your favourite cheese or cheeses?
I can tell you that straight away. It's brie and cranberry.
Is that it?
Yeah, brie and cranberry.
Excellent. All right. Next segment. Sweet. This is the shortest cheese discussion we've had on this show.
I was going to say, in the history, in the short history, a brief history of Rip It Up, that is our shortest ever cheese segment.
Excellent.
Wow. I'm not prepared. Wow.
So
that's usually at least a 20-minute segment.
Love it. Kev, we got another question on the public questions, correct?
We have, yeah. And I'm going to bring in question 2 and 3 because they kind of relate quite well to each other there. So, so we asked the public on our question 2, which kind of lent on a little bit. I don't know, talking about lilt. A little bit from what we was kind of talking about just before he performed. And so we led on from the initial first question, just a basic opener. And we said, so, you may have told us about one of the above, but when doing a live performance, presentation, or public speech, have you ever felt incredibly nervous, anxious, panicked, or even felt so uncomfortable that you just couldn't go ahead with it? Similar to how you touched on yourself, Josh, or maybe some other feeling at all. And then we kind of opened it up for them to answer yes or no on that, and then for them to give us their individual comments as well. So, again, most people did. There was only, it was 80% of the people that responded said that yes, they had some kind of, anxious feeling before they performed. And then 20% just said no. And of the few of the people that did put comments, because it was purely they could answer if they wanted to. If they didn't want to, then, totally respect that, because it can be quite difficult for some people to talk about, even if anonymously. So we had, let me just get these few comments up. Somebody said, absolutely, I have felt like I'm going to throw up many times. I never actually have, and I now have some great mechanisms for removing the anxiety. It's one of the areas I get asked to coach people on a lot to help them overcome feelings of anxiety when presenting or public speaking, and having had first-hand experience of it definitely helps me have empathy when coaching. So that's quite a good detailed comment. And then somebody else put, I was very nervous beforehand, sweaty palms, sick feeling in my stomach and trembling, but I continued with the presentation, albeit with rosy cheeks and a crackling voice. As I got through it, the nerves started to melt away and my confidence grew. And then they said that they actually passed with merit. So, they got through their little kind of mini battle or whatever at that time. And actually, there was nothing to worry about in the long run. And then I think I'll give you another on that before I go on to question 3. That person said, when speaking off the cuff without sufficient preparation, when speaking to a group of eminent leaders with far more knowledge than me. Well, I imagine that could be quite racking, in a room full of leaders, and you've got to give them a speech. It's like, hey, it's just me. So I'll link that in. I'll go straight into the kind of question 3 there as well. And so then we furthered that by saying, if you had those experiences above and or have shared them, how have you managed the situation? So again, like you was talking about grounding, Josh. So here we kind of put that over onto the public. So either at the time or going forward for their own mental well-being. And again, so please feel free to comment below. And same again, we had kind of, it's about 84% of the people said that they have had those. And then there was a 16% that hadn't. 16. And a few responses to that was... Right, so another person said that, so I now have a number of great techniques for managing anxiety. I am trained in NLP, and there are some great tools to use in that. I've also studied neuroscience, and that has also aided me in speaking to my unconscious mind. And finally, I am a trainee hypnotherapist and often use that to help clients overcome their anxiety. So that person, whoever's linked to their previous question as well, they've really kind of gone to town on actually exploring exploring ways of dealing with their anxiety and then to help others as well. So, that's massive kudos there. Somebody else said, I used some gentle breathing techniques before to control myself a little. And another said, generally, having been in a role which required regular public speaking, I almost always spoke from a prepared text. Although I was conscious that among my colleagues, this was weak, it reassured me, and I am told I was quite good at it. However, I did nothing through my many years to deal with my inability, or felt inability, to perform effectively without full text. It led to extreme anxiety every time I found myself needing to do it. So that's interesting, isn't it? You've got someone who actually would be regularly doing public speaking, but because they got so comfortable with, like, say, an auto cue or a bunch of text but they personally didn't feel like that they were solving their like anxiety problems because they were just relying on that text. So that's kind of interesting. It'd be nice to kind of discuss on, Josh, kind of get your thoughts on that bunch. I can kind of refer back to stuff if you need me to, but yeah, it'd be good to hear.
The last one in particular, I can completely understand that and empathize with that, because that is pretty much the exact same sort of scenario as what I was sort of describing with the on stage having a kind of an actual sort of plotted thing that you're doing or saying or performing, as opposed to speaking from an improvised perspective. Like, I know that I could go and sort of play a gig now with material that I've rehearsed and practiced, and I'd be fine. Though by comparison, in such as a job interview or something like that, where it's essentially just sort of working out what you're saying on the spot, and obviously you've got a lot of different things, variables where you need to be sort of making sure that you're paying attention so that you don't sort of lose out on the opportunity. That would still give me the same sort of anxiety as when I first started applying for jobs, is the best way to sort of put that. So yeah, I completely get that. And if I were in your position, I'd be reacting the same way, I think. I would definitely be using auto cues, because I wouldn't, as a public speaker, I definitely wouldn't be like sort of in a position to sort of come up with things in the sense of improv. Not in any sort of scenario I could think of, really. Yeah,
I think in the whole interview thing, there are plenty of curveballs that can come up that you might not necessarily be fully prepared for.
That's it, yeah.
But yeah, Milo, how about yourself on the kind of topic the answers that we touched on there?
It's interesting that one, the person said that sounds like that they were giving a hard time for using a prepared speech consistently, which I don't really much care for that, because the reality is, if this person needs to use a prepared speech, then let them use a prepared speech, right? I don't know what the job is, but
because on the flip, they were kind of obviously, it said there that, they were kind of got that kind of that vibe off it, what I mean, off the colleagues, but
yeah,
they were also told that they were quite good at using the prepared. It's almost like an underhanded compliment in a way. Like,
it was, yeah. If you're good at using the prepared speech, then use the prepared speech, and people shouldn't give you a hard time for it. Like I said, I don't know what the job is, but the thing is, like, not everybody is good at public speaking, or not everybody is good at being in front of a crowd. Like, we chose our fields to go into that involves being in front of people, right? So it falls on us to develop those skills to help us deal with that type of anxiety, but not necessarily everybody does. I used to work in a corporate environment, and I remember working with this one girl, and she was the same way. She didn't want to do presentations. She didn't want to, do any of that kind of stuff within the office. And she made me totally aware of it. So I never really because she actually reported to me. And so I never really tried to put her in, I didn't force her into positions where she would then have to do that kind of stuff. And that always bothered me, because other managers and stuff would do that. They'd be like, oh, well, you just need to learn how to be good at presenting, and you need to learn how to do this, and you need to up that skill set. And it's like, this person's not good at that. They don't necessarily want to be good at it. So why don't you find the skills and talents that they are good at, and then promote that, versus trying to force them to be good at something they're not.
Absolutely.
And I think that's with this kind of stuff as well. Like, if you choose to be in a field that involves speaking publicly, then work on that skill and talent. But your coworkers or your bosses shouldn't be forcing you to do it if it's not something that you're wanting to do, or want in an area that you want to go into,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously encouragement is one thing, but you like to say, forcing somebody to actually do something that they're not, don't come naturally to them, then, well, that's just the difference between good and bad people management, I think, as well, in any workplace or any environment.
Yeah. All right. Should we do another song, Josh?
Can do.
Is that?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, no, I'm cool with that. Yeah. Seeing as cheese wasn't, I'm gonna go. I'm going now. So.
Your cheese melted all over the place.
I'm cheesed off, man. Like,
I'm in the mood for brie now. Right.
Yeah, brie being probably one of the most briefest spelt words, and it's briefer than brief. Brie is basically brief, you know.
Yeah.
Abbreviated brief.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Whenever you're ready, man. What's the song then, Josh? Give us the intro on.
This is for the band that was mentioned earlier that I've now translated over to rather than playing solo stuff. So my band is the Crimson Rays, and this is the debut single that we recorded back in February and released last year in September. So I hope you enjoy. Blind ignorance, or are you simply arrogant with fists in the air for a national embarrassment? Why the prejudice? Your mindset is so credulous. You placed your faith in a plan that's clearly tenuous. Do you see the deprivation? Do you see the desecration of the simple lives that some are fighting for? Do you see them laughing at you from the comforts of their mansions? When we fall down, guilty conscience comes for you. I have no sympathy for you. I doubt that you can see just what you've done. Your mind swayed by fairy tales and lies. In time, they will push us down and make us fall in line. Fake promises are told by their accomplices to cloud our minds while the government abolishes opportunity and any chance of unity. They write the rules so they benefit exclusively. Do you see the separation? Do you see the correlation? They divide us just so they can keep us down. Do you hear the elocution from a voice of mass illusion? Don't believe a single word they say to you. I have no sympathy for you. I doubt that you can see just what you've done. Your mind swayed by fairy tales and lies. In time, they will push us down and make us fall in line. Don't you think there's anything wrong with forging figures about our healthcare? Don't you think there's anything wrong with forcing families out and elsewhere? Don't you think there's anything wrong with burning notes in front of the homeless? Don't you think there's anything wrong with how they lead and say that the hope is? I have no sympathy for you. I doubt that you can see just what you've done. Your mind swayed by fairy tales and lies. In time, they will push us down and make us fall in line.
Well,
Yes, Cheers. Thank you.
Nice. So I clearly there's a message in that song. What inspired it?
So it was when it was the UK general election in 2019. Basically, just looking over every time that I can recall there being elections, just the complete chaos in division that they create. It just feels like with all the ads and the campaigns that are put for sort of the parties and that kind of thing, as much as obviously it feels like it's sort of obviously with the intention of party A, party B, party C or whatever, sort of trying to promote themselves, quite a lot of the time, because of the sort of the way that social media in particular can impact that and the way that certain things are interpreted, it just causes so many different people with clashing political views to basically just fight, argue, fall out with one another. And it just felt like that division was so pointless in the sense that if nobody can agree on any of these things and nobody likes anyone and it's causing all these, you know, like sort of riots and that kind of thing, at the end of the day, you know, I don't think there's much in the way of sort of politics for any particular party sort of being right or wrong. And I think there's a lot of people that would sort of agree with that. Obviously, there might be for certain people sort of like preferences one way or another. But I think that people should like sort of learn to sort of tolerate other viewpoints. Where you get like the sort of extremism in certain times, I feel like that's what's causing a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of conversations that people aren't ready to have because they're so invested in a particular mindset politically that it kind of like negates any opportunity for growth and actual sort of public improvement in the way that the country's run, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's very much become more like kind of like sports team tribalism, you know, rather than actual politics. You know, I mean, I know Milo's not going to be kind of any stranger to, you know, political divisions because obviously, you know, in his country, you know, they had similar kind of within the UK. There's probably a lot of mirroring things between the public where, you know, quite a divisive split has happened. I mean, I don't know, Milo, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've all seen the news, so I don't need to add to that from the US point of view, but I think you hit it on the head, Josh, when you said social media's impact on it, because that's really where we see, I mean, obviously there's been certain divides and debates throughout history, but with the rise of social media, we've really seen people kind of grind their feet into the ground with their right to the other person's wrong, and just that hardcore clash between the two sides. And I certainly don't see it getting any better anytime soon, but maybe through the power of music.
Yeah, and I really love the lyrics in that. Obviously it was very anti-establishment in its core, but yeah, I mean, absolutely cracking lyrics to it, and you was really actually nailing it then.
Yeah, that's right.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good job.
Yeah, so now we're going to kind of nip on to this is Milo's favorite segment of the show.
Well, I don't know. Between this and cheese, it's hard to say.
Well, when the cheese segment goes so quickly, maybe that's the winner now. So yeah, this is our segment, which is Ask an American, and yeah, so Josh, this is your chance to ask Milo a question, any question you like.
I'd got something in mind for this specifically because it's something that's sort of piqued my interest, given what I've briefly previously mentioned about sort of expanding circles and like sort of seeing new venues and that kind of thing. So my question for you is, as someone who enjoys finding new venues and making friends, how does the localized music scene in such as Seattle compare to that of the scene typically portrayed in England?
Yeah, that's a hard call because I haven't experienced the English music scene since moving here, which I want to do.
Sorry, did you just move? Milo. So when did you actually move?
I moved here in October of 2019. So
I see.
Just before, and the first lockdown was March, April, around that time frame.
Yeah, late March. Yeah.
So let's see, what have I seen? I've seen.
I suppose you've been in Dublin though, so.
And in Dublin. So the Dublin music scene, I don't want to rip on Dublin too much because there is a music scene there, but it's a lot of cover bands. It's a lot of playing for tourists, kind of because it's such a touristed city. And so it's hard to find good venues. There are good venues there. Well, I used to live not too far from one they had a downstairs stage, upstairs stage, and they'd get some really good bands there. They had blues night. So there are good bands in Dublin and there is good music to listen to. It's just harder to find because the majority of the stuff you find is cover bands or, playing Irish songs for the tourists kind of stuff versus finding good music. It is there. It's just harder to find. In Seattle, Seattle has a reputation as being a music city. It has changed over the years, unfortunately, thanks to all the tech companies moving in there. A lot of the good indie stuff has moved out, but there is still a decent music scene there. Here in London, I have a feeling I could find more. I have a feeling there's a good music scene here. I believe there's a good music scene here. So I'm looking forward to experiencing it, but I haven't. I've seen one actual concert since I've been here, and it wasn't even up when I moved here. I actually saw it before I moved here. I flew over for it and moved back, and that was The Cure when they were playing. So that's a pretty big band. So in regards to the indie music scene, I haven't really experienced too much, although I'm slowly meeting people that are smaller musicians that I'm starting to follow. So I'm looking forward to when they start playing, and I'm going to go see some of their shows. I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think London, if whatever you want to find, I think you can find it in London, whether that's genre of music or anything.
I think so. Camden. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's here. I mean, it's punk music was so relevant here. I think you could still find some good punk music. I love indie guitar music. Stuff like what you were playing, stuff like what our previous guest we had on, what she played. That kind of stuff. I just love.
Claire, yeah.
Claire Shaw, Claire L. Shaw. Who else is so there's a lot of good. I'm an indie music snob. My girlfriend often calls me a douchey hipster because of the music I listen to, and because I'm like, oh well, this is so and so, and she's like, well, I never heard of them, and I'm like, well, that's because you're not cool enough. So,
yeah, come on, girlfriend, get with it. You're really gonna have to make that vegan chili now.
Yeah, totally make up for it. But I really am looking forward to going and seeing some shows here in London. Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to give us an update then when you have, so then you can give us a bit of a comparison on Seattle to London kind of.
Yeah. There you
go. UK.
All right. So I'm not going to do the turn it around, ask a Brit this time around, because in the last episode we did this badly drawn bamboo joke that really should turn into an actual challenge. We were like, oh, we should make this a challenge, or Kev, and so we're going to start a challenge. Audience, you're listening now for the badly drawn bamboo challenge that we want to see some pictures of badly drawn Kev Bamboo.
What am I doing?
Yes. So Josh, do you have a badly drawn bamboo for us?
I do definitely have a badly drawn bamboo available for you. My masterpiece.
Let's see it then. Come on.
Right. Make sure it's in the right frame.
Oh, wow. Oh. So that looks like, what does that look like? Some old Eastern European Vlad the Impaler kind of thing, except for instead of killing, he's having a cup of coffee just before bed.
Hold it up again.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I can see that. That's not bad. That's about right. Yeah. Well, you must be seeing yourself reversed in the screen, Kev. That's pretty spot on. I would call that a good badly drawn bamboo.
That is,
thank you.
I think I'm gonna actually rate these, I reckon.
We'll have to.
This is the first one. I think I'm gonna give that Oh, see, am I harsh though? Am I harsh on my ratings? I'm going to go 6.5
out of 10.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, out of 10.
It's not bad at all. It's not bad at all. Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
So, audience, real quick, we should throw this out. How do people send us these badly drawn bamboos, Kev? What's the best way?
Well, yeah, I mean, they can either send it into my social over on Insta, Bamboo Creatives, or they can send it to yours as well. You know,
you got it. At Milo Denison Instagram. Yep.
But yeah, either anyway, you know, you can just, or Facebook comments or whatever, drop them in there, and
there you go. You can track us down. We're not difficult to
we'll drop in an email or whatever on there.
You got it. There's not a lot of Kev Bamboos and there's not a lot of Milo Denisons. So you can track us down to send us yours.
And we're both matching today as well, we got the play going
squares.
On. And that was not in the script as well. So right. So yeah, to be honest, we're gonna kind of get round to more just kind of giving our kind of more our closing opinions on the whole kind of the topics and our own thoughts on, you know, anxiety as a whole. And yeah, so I'm going to put that one over to you, Josh, more, but on kind of like the future and how we as well, and how we come out of COVID, and when you go back to like playing live gigs and any of those kind of like, you know, feelings that you might actually have coming up, because obviously now you're going to be going in and performing as a live, you know, as a band rather than a solo artist. And more just to kind of know people like your kind of own closing view on this whole topic.
So as well, like sort of basically to sort of go alongside what's been mentioned earlier, in particular for artists or people that have been sort of like regularly in some sort of performing scenario in their past, whether it's to do with their job or like just as a hobby or whichever it is. Going back to it now, after having not done it for so many, like however many months it's been, you can't really include that middle gap when things opened up briefly, because it wasn't really long enough to actually sort of reintroduce that feeling, I don't think. And having been without it for so long, and having been back to it now in the past couple of weeks and played a couple of open mics, one thing that you might sort of find yourself feeling is a little bit of a sort of dissociation type thing going on from what's actually happening in the room, because I know this happened not yesterday, but last week, playing at a venue in Nottingham, and just seeing everyone again that I'd spoken to as part of the Nottingham scene for the first time in so long, as if nothing had even happened, just felt very, very strange. I just felt like, I feel like a lot of people have said similar, like it's just not even been addressed actually in person, such as to sort of say, I've not seen you in ages, really glad to catch up and that kind of thing. So I think it's kind of given anyway. So people just sort of have just got on with the day. And I don't know, it's just something very, very strange about returning to that without it sort of being sort of spoken about there and then in the moment. But I mean, that aside, I suppose it's just a case of reminding yourself why it is that you've got into that scene or that particular hobby, and just sort of re-immersing yourself into the reasons why you enjoy it. As was mentioned earlier with regards to the anxiety thing, like from a performance sort of side of things, there are certain people who will have probably spent a lot of time throughout lockdown practicing, and then there'll be probably an equal amount of people who've just sort of left it be and haven't sort of practiced at all. There's no right or wrong. You do what you've got to do. You do what is, you know, the best thing for you to be doing at that point in time. There's some people that have taken breaks from music throughout lockdown and over the past sort of year and a half. And if that's what you need to do for the sake of your mental health, then absolutely, like, you know, that's what you should be prioritizing. If you have gone without practice, I would recommend, just even if it's 2 or 3 times just before you go back on to actually play any kind of event or whatever it is that you're doing, just basically from the perspective of it's a lot more daunting going back to it after so long without. Even if you are, I know like a few people that are sort of quite experienced in what they do, and you know they've still sort of had a bit of the the jitters from a sort of going back to a stage for the first time in so long. So just basically, as was mentioned earlier, to sort of be a sort of a thing to block an opportunity for anxiety to actually turn up, in the sense of worrying about potential mistakes. Because if you know that you've practiced enough, then you're not as likely to actually be concerned about making the mistakes, I don't think. That's what I've found, at least. So that would be my best advice, I think.
Yeah, I reckon you've got there's some good little tips in there. And definitely people have become accustomed to a certain way of life, between these kind of this strange COVID kind of lockdown void and whatnot. But yeah, Milo, I want to kind of hear your kind of closing thoughts on the whole topic and that coming back to performing, as it were. And
yeah, when it comes to performing, exactly the reason why stage performers rehearse is so that way when they go out there on stage, they're, they know the lines, they're comfortable with it, that thing. And even improv, right? You might improvise lines for improv, but they still practice and get those improv muscles moving and stuff. They just don't go out and do it from scratch. And so like you were saying there, Josh, yeah, rehearse a few times before you jump back up on stage, you know, to where you're feeling a little bit more comfortable with it. And then, yeah, if you're going out and it's your first performance in a while or whatever, and you screw something up, blow it off and move on, and just, that's going to happen, and don't let it be the end of the world, kind of a thing. And then, yeah, I guess in regards to just anxiety around going out and being in public, find whatever works for you in regards to dealing with anxiety. I know everybody has it in different ways. And I'd say when going out and getting back in public, okay, we had a lockdown, we got out of lockdown, and then we went back into lockdown because people were complete dumbasses as soon as they got out of lockdown, and they went and they got COVID and they spread COVID and they got everybody sick. So yes, we can go out in public, but that doesn't mean go running around, licking the railings at the underground
or licking someone else's face, just randomly.
Exactly.
Hey, I love you. Like.
Exactly. Wearing a mask on the underground isn't going to kill you in London. It's not going to kill you on the bus. You're not going to die of suffocation for having a mask on. And do an elbow bump instead of a handshake and a kiss, for the time being, until the rates consistently stay down, and tell people get vaccinated. Oh, and get vaccinated. Don't be a, anti-vaxxer dumbass.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all pretty damn sensible and down the line kind of comments. I mean, I totally agree with both of you on what you've kind of come to there. There's not really much else that I could add, because I don't disagree with either on those. I mean, who could?
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, where can people find you if they want to track you down? Social media, websites, that kind of stuff?
So we're on a fair few different platforms. We're on Facebook and Instagram, literally as the Crimson Rays, all sort of one great long word on Instagram. Obviously, there's no underscores or anything. Just literally the Crimson Rays with spaces as a band page on Facebook. You can find us as the Crimson Rays with underscores on TikTok. We've started up TikTok recently.
Oh, wow.
That's our first TikTok brand.
TikToker, yeah, I like that.
TikTok brand ambassador. But it's got to be done, promoting the brand these days. It's a big platform. So.
The way that the algorithms work on TikTok, in a similar sort of way to Instagram, but in the sense that the hashtags essentially form what your newsfeed is, just has so much more potential reach, I think, than certain platforms. This is something that's too good to be missed, I think. We are on YouTube as well. And if you were interested in our actual songs themselves, Fall in Line, which was played earlier today, is on all the platforms. So Google Play, Amazon Music, iTunes, Spotify, Apple Music, all them. And we have a website up and running at the moment as well, which has got a few more bits to add to it, but the general principle is there. You can find us at www.thecrimsonrays.com.
Any scheduled upcoming shows?
We are playing for DH Lawrence Festival on the 11th of September. It's going to be our debut gig. Obviously, we've not been able to meet up over all this time. We're looking to get some practice sessions in ready for that. Really
and whereabouts is that, and where can people kind of like get details of that show?
Yeah, that's it. It's at the Old Wine Vaults in Eastwood. So the lineup has been sort of confirmed. There's quite a few different other local artists playing on that, including such as Pretty Babs. Really looking forward to be supporting some quite high profile local artists. The actual time slots for everyone playing hasn't actually been announced yet. Like we don't even know that as such yet, but we'll of course post that on all of the social media stuff as time goes on. So that's as much as we know at the moment. Debut gig is the only one we've got lined up at the moment, so we want to try and make it a bit of a big thing.
Well, and to you, our Rip It Up audience, thanks for joining us on the show, listening or watching, depending on how you're taking it in. You can follow me at Milo Denison on Instagram, and Kev.
Yeah, you can follow me at Bamboo Creatives, or Bamboo_Creatives.
There we go. All right. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks Josh. Cheers.